Every so often, I think I have a rather unproductive day, and today I was thinking was rather unproductive. I've done a little teaching, which was very enjoyable, and when I have an enjoyable lesson, somehow there's a bit of me which just thinks, "Oh, that wasn't useful. That isn't working. That's entertaining yourself. That's having a good time." I had such a good lesson about the mechanics of poetry, and when you're suddenly teaching people and you suddenly realize, my goodness, they're getting it. And we were talking about the nature of prosody, the rhythm of poetry, the dum, iambic, babum, trochaic, and so on. Dactyls. Dactyl comes from the Greek word for fingers. So in pterodactyl is a winged, fingered creature. But dactyl is the three-beat bar, which you see so clearly in something like Charge of the Light Brigade. Bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum. And it was lovely doing this, and we looked at enjambment and caesuras, and I don't know whether, did we get onto feminine endings and masculine endings? I don't remember, but I remember afterwards thinking, oh, I must, I must check out Pushkin. And Pushkin, of course, uses iambic. He doesn't use an iambic pentameter. He uses an iambic tetrameter. That's 4 bars with a feminine or a masculine ending at the end. So it's 8 beats plus 1, 9 beats in a line. And that's so interesting. It's so non-British. But Shakespeare, of course, uses feminine endings all over the place, and so does Milton. And it's where the stress changes, the author, the poet, is drawing attention to a word or to an idea. So where the beat changes, and you can look at poetry from a purely technical point of view if you want to, and you're always going to find some deep answer there. Why has the poet put a comma in the middle of the line, created a caesura, and made you stop, and therefore emphasized one of the words on either side of that comma? It's because they're drawing attention to that word. And similarly with the enjambment, where there's no comma or full stop at the end of the line, and it drives you into the next line, and you're so exhausted that you have to stop after 2 or 3 words, and that word gets emphasized. Why is the poet drawing attention to that word? Yeah, they're drawing attention because it's important. And so the enjambment, this technical device, is driving attention to a particular word. And when the poet changes the rhythm, that rhythm change is so odd that it draws attention to a particular word or a particular idea. And Shakespeare does it marvellously, for example, in The Winter's Tale and Leontes' mad speech. Laertes, what's the name of the king in Winter's Tale? I can't remember. In the king's mad speech in Winter's Tale, and you've got those great gaps in the text in plays like Macbeth, and the meter is still continuing, and that gap is there, and again, it's all there in the technical machinery of writing. Anyway, that's just to tell you what I've been doing today and how I think I've rather been having fun rather than working, and then I switched on the BBC, and I found this amazing little program where Amol Rajan was interviewing Sheila Hancock. And Sheila Hancock is, in some ways, I think she's one of these unsung, brilliant dames of the British theatre. And she was married to the Inspector Morse man. But in the middle of this long interview, which certainly wasted a bit of time, and I certainly enjoyed it, she talked about Churchill, and it's a story I've heard, and I can't place the actual quotation, and she couldn't, but we both clearly heard the same thing. Maybe somebody in the comments section will actually know exactly what the quotation is and can pinpoint it and can write back and say, this is what Churchill actually said. But Churchill was asked, why doesn't he cut taxes on culture? And he apparently said, well, what are we fighting for then? And she was talking about the collapse of regional theatre, the collapse of, well, she wasn't talking actually, but I would talk about also the collapse of the great arts, the collapse of ballet, opera, Shakespeare, the indiscriminate throwing away of these great training grounds, because these are universities that train the great performers of tomorrow, with a training in ballet, with a training in classical music. You have the ability to go off and do something else. Not everybody has the wonderful opportunity as a youngster to go into the lanes, theatre school, and to learn the craft that way. Some people learn it by simply doing it, and it also educates an audience that's then ready for other more interesting things. That also knows there is a hive, a working museum, if you like, of the arts. Not everything has to be in modern dress. Some things can be more traditional. The Royal Shakespeare Company seems not to agree with me about that, but the National Theatre goes to either extreme, and that's how it should be. That's how it should be. And every so often, these great theatres come out with something extraordinary, like Matilda. Matilda is such a wonderful example of the powerhouse of classical training. And ballet, opera, Shakespeare, pantomime, comedy, and education, these are all part of that staple diet of our culture. And that is what we express. Whether it's ephemeral, like pantomime, or whether it's something which we quote on a daily basis, like Shakespeare, it is part of the culture that informs and enriches us. And it's part of our heritage, as Sheila Hancock put it rather brilliantly in the documentary. It's as important as it's as important as our health. I entirely agree with her, and I so much enjoyed having that opportunity to see this interview. It's you can find it on the BBC podcast thing on the I can't think what you call it now, the BBC iPlayer. You can find it on BBC iPlayer, the Amol Rajan interviews, and it is so worthwhile. And I urge you to have a look at it for the things it brings up, and for this wonderful woman who sort of hit attention in the 1960s with the rag trade. And then I remember her in the National Theatre directing these extraordinary productions, many of which I was involved in other productions of these when I was a student. And I thought, oh, wow, I can go and see this now at the National Theatre, and I know all about it. And she still made me think. And it's so wonderful when you go and see a show that you think you know, and you learn something new from it, and you see it in a different way. Her production of The Duchess of Malfi certainly did that to me. And I think The Duchess of Malfi was the first show I was involved with when I was a student, and then I went to see her production at the National Theatre, and it blew my socks off. And I remember directing Hamlet and doing Hamlets and things, and then going to a fairly local production in Moscow and seeing a production of Hamlet in Russian, and I was left with my mouth on the floor, because suddenly I was looking at a production which was based on a military society, and that was the bit I'd never thought of. But of course that is absolutely at the core of that play, and it's changed forever the way I think about Hamlet. And I think there's something. There never comes a point when you put the classics away and you say, "Oh yes, we've had enough of that now. We just need to, we just need to get on with making money, or we just need to get on with modern theatre or modern poetry or modern literature." No, no, the classics can always be revisited, and there will always be an opportunity to see your own experience. Your own experience brings a new vision to these classics, and it's so refreshing.